Hi everybody, this is Mr. Williams here with your second slideshow on the Pigman by Paul Zindel. Don't forget, if you missed it, there's a slideshow on predicting and the oath, the first three paragraphs of the story. You should watch that before you watch this one on chapters 1 and 2. Today we're going to meet our narrators. This is the start of the story, which starts our exposition, so let's talk about that. Every story starts with exposition, and exposition is the necessary background information to understand the story. It includes the setting, not only where as in location, but also what time period, the when, and also includes how long. That part comes in play later on once we know what's going on, but the setting, it is important to know how many years have passed, months, days, etc. We also get our characters, the narrator, which could be the protagonist, our main character, and the antagonist is also a possibility. That's the person that goes against or creates conflict for our protagonist. And the situation is important too. Just generally knowing what's going on in the story is very important so that you can understand the events that happen throughout the story. So in case you need a visual, we're here at the exposition right at the start. You'll notice that in this storyline, we're at the flat part of the storyline. Nothing exciting is going to really happen here in regards to the overall plot of the story. We're just getting the basic information we need to understand what's going on. So let's look for that basic information in the exposition. We're actually going to skip the first part, which is John and Lorraine, our characters and our narrators, because we have a bigger slide for that later. So we'll come back to them, but don't think that they're not important. What do we know about our setting? We're probably in the United States, and we really are definitely in the United States. There are some advanced inferences we can make here. The New York Times is referenced. They talk about Miss America. There's a class called Problems in American Democracy, and there's probably other things as well. They all tell us our setting. The time period, we don't have it locked down yet, but it's probably around the time the story is published. For instance, we have blackboards and typewriters. We have Lorraine going to a teacher's house to drop off papers. You probably wouldn't do that today. And this idea of the bathroom bomber, where John's able to have 23 cherry bombs blow up in toilets, you could never get away with that today. After one of those, there'd be a serious investigation. That's definitely from the past. And what's going on in the story? We do learn some new information. That's that Mr. Pignotti will die by the end of the story. It is referenced that he is dead at the point of writing, so we should be aware of that. It's very important to understand. But otherwise, there's really nothing new here. We're learning about our characters mostly in these first two chapters, and that's not always going to happen, but in a story like this one, and we'll jump ahead to point of view, we have first person limited, but we have two narrators. One narrates the odd chapters, that's John, and Lorraine narrates the even ones. So these first two chapters really have to develop our characters more than the actual plot of the story. And it's a limited point of view, meaning that when John talks, he only can hear his thoughts. When Lorraine talks, she can only tell us her thoughts. So that's all we're going to be able to get, and so this is important for the opening of this story. I should note that to help you out, Paul Zindel does give you hints and lets you know who's narrating. For instance, at the start of chapter 3, we'll hear the quote, "like Lorraine told you." At the start of chapter 4, it'll say, "John told you about." So there will be some hints to who is narrating in case you forget in between chapters, at least at the start. So going back to John and Lorraine, we need to know these characters for the story to make sense. One of the big traits that Lorraine mentions about John is that he's handsome. This is just a note to make because it could tell us how Lorraine thinks about John, and it could be just useful for his interactions. John's also sneaky, / a liar, / a trickster. These all kind of go together. They go with the fact that he might be a little cleverer. He also is willing to lie because he can get away with it. But with the bathroom bombings and the colossal fruit rolls, all those point to him being tricky and being deceptive. As a leader, we see that he leads those super colossal fruit rolls, which shows how much power he could have if he wanted it. He's dynamic. He can make people follow his lead. Lorraine also mentions that he's not compassionate, at least not on the outside. We see little glimpses of him being compassionate with the sub who doesn't have the super colossal fruit roll happen to him, but overall he's defined as not being compassionate. The inappropriate language is also interesting. Lorraine doesn't want to swear, but John does. That's something worth noting. We don't have a lot of information on the family so far, but we are kind of interested in John's background, and there'll be more on his family in the future. Now, Lorraine is basically the opposite of John, which will be interesting when we're alternating chapters later on. John is handsome, but Lorraine is, quote, not a pretty girl, unquote. That's from her mother. We don't know if that's fully true because Lorraine is insecure and paranoid, as we'll talk soon, but it is an interesting thing to note that that's how Lorraine perceives herself. John is sneaky, a liar, a trickster, whereas Lorraine is quiet and shy. She tries to stay away from people. She's not talking. That's worth noting. John can be a leader. Lorraine is insecure and paranoid, as previously stated. Lorraine is always worried about what people are thinking about her. That paranoia test shows how paranoid she can be. Now, we talked about John not being compassionate, or at least not showing it. Lorraine's the opposite. They give an example with a teacher where Lorraine is worried about that teacher, and another one with Miss Ryland. Her compassion is an important trait especially when we're dealing with more serious matters down the road. John likes inappropriate language. Lorraine uses medical language, words like thrombosis, psychoanalytical, Freud, repressed, lots of words like that. She's learned because her mom's a nurse. That's very important. And speaking of the mom, one thing we know about the mom, especially because of that quote up top, is the mom is critical of Lorraine, and that could factor in later on. Now, there isn't much left to say except for what to expect in chapters 3 and 4. You know your narrators now, your main characters as well. You know the setting to a degree, and you know the situation. You'll get a little bit more in chapter 3 about the inciting incident. That's the event that'll lead us to conflict and the rising action. We have to start getting into the main plot of the story, and there'll be a clear event that sets us into the path where there'll be some more conflict with these characters. We also know Paul Zindel has 2 narrators, and we have to ask ourselves in every chapter, why did Paul Zindel choose to have John or Lorraine narrate a specific chapter or event? Certain chapters will be better for John to narrate, others will be better for Lorraine to narrate. It's going to be important which one Zindel picks as an author. There'll be some more hints at exposition. We don't have our full setting yet. We don't have the full situation. So although the rising action will happen soon, the inciting incident will happen soon to create that rising action, we will still get little snippets of setting and the situation as well. And our characters will continue to develop also. So that exposition, that background knowledge that we get at the start is just going to be built upon throughout the story. And last but not least, as you're reading, continue to anticipate and predict, especially at the start. You want to start thinking about where the story could go, what could happen to our characters, getting really engaged and hooked into the story. And if you have any questions, always feel free to email me or review these notes. And thanks for watching.